Welcome to Downpour.com's interview series. I'm Grover Gardner, and today it's my pleasure to be speaking with Jennifer Niven. Jennifer is the author of the popular Velva Jean series. Becoming Clementine is the latest release in the series. Her other books have received high praise as well. The true story, Ada Blackjack, is optioned for film. Her memoir, The Aquanet Diaries, Big Hair, Big Dreams, Small Town, is optioned for a television series. And The Ice Master was named one of the top 10 nonfiction books of the year in 2000 by Entertainment Weekly and has been translated into 8 languages. Jennifer and her works have appeared in several magazines, including Newsweek and the New York Times Book Review, also on Dateline NBC and the Discovery Channel, and she has been featured in several foreign television programs. Blackstone Audio is publishing the audio version of Becoming Clementine simultaneously with the hardcover on September 25th, 2012. Jennifer, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about this wonderful character that you've devoted 3 books to now, Velva Jean. What was the genesis for this marvelous person?
Well, she was actually born a very long time ago in a short story of my mother's. My mother is also an author, and I was in film school at the American Film Institute years ago, and I needed to find the subject for my thesis film. And I remembered reading a long, long time ago short stories my mother had written about her small North Carolina hometown. And I remembered one in particular called Velva Jean Learns to Drive. Now, it was a very short story. So from that little glimpse of Velva Jean, I turned it into a short film, which won an Emmy Award. And I knew then that I wanted to do something more with it, but I didn't know what. And then about, 8 years later, 6 years later, I started thinking about doing a novel. So that led to one novel, and that has since led to 4, actually. The third one comes out next week, but the 4th I just handed in to my editor this past weekend. So who knew when it started with a short story that it would become this?
There's a 4th one.
Yes, there's a 4th one. That
How
will
exciting.
be next year. Yes, exactly.
The new one coming out shortly, Becoming Clementine, I assume we say, since is that right?
I just say, oh, Becoming Clementine, but you are saying it the way that she would pronounce it, being in France.
And so she takes on the personality of a French resistance fighter.
Yes. When she finds herself crash landed in France unexpectedly, and she is left with a team of agents and wants to become part of their mission as she's trying to follow her own mission, which is to search for her missing brother. So in doing so, she has to take on the personality of this other person.
Does the 4th one, do we meet up with her after the war?
We meet up with her just as the war is ending. And in the 4th one, she goes to Hollywood in 1945, which I love writing. I live in Los Angeles, and I just absolutely love that era in Hollywood. So I was happy as could be doing the research for that.
Now, your mother is a writer, notably a biographer of
That's right.
Carl Sandburg, Edward Steichen, and she has a new book coming out actually soon herself about Thornton Wilder, which I know I'm going to be dashing to the store for that one. Now, your first book was nonfiction. Was this inspired by her writing? Why did you start with a biography yourself?
You know, it's funny. I had just recently graduated from film school when I came across the idea for the first book. And so I was actually thinking in terms of film. I was not thinking in terms of books. And when I started doing research on the idea and becoming more and more excited about all the firsthand resources and materials, I, of course, told my mom about it. And she said, the movie can always come later, but you really should write this as a book. And so that's kind of how that happened. I just fell in love with the story, and I'd never thought about writing a book before. And suddenly I thought, all right, it's something I would love to read. So that's how I fell into doing it that way.
This is The Ice Master that I'm referring to. Was it difficult to write a book?
It was. Writing a book is one of the hardest things I think that you can do on this earth. But it was also something, I mean, I've loved to write since I was a little girl. And because I grew up watching my mother write, I grew up seeing how difficult it was and how challenging it could be. And because of that, I started trying anything else, acting, or, not that that's not hard, but I tried other things because I thought basically she scared me away just by seeing how tough it was. But I couldn't help it because I love writing and I've always loved it more than anything. So it was a joy to write because it's my passion, but it was tough too. It was very tough.
And then the movie came along, the Velva Jean movie, and that inspired you to turn to fiction.
That's right.
Uh,
I had actually done two nonfiction after Ice Master. I did Ada Blackjack, which was a sort of sequel to that. And
mhm.
so, I was very much in the nonfiction world. I love the nonfiction world. In fact, I get the urge to go back to it frequently, and I will at some point write more nonfiction. But I was trying to find another nonfiction idea after Ada, and I couldn't find one I loved so much that I wanted to do a book about it. The thing I really wanted to write was Velva Jean. And so that's why I decided to just go in that direction.
You've also written a biography about growing up in southern Indiana.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people might think, well, that's in the North, and I know that you consider yourself a Southern woman, but some people might know, but others might not, that Southern Indiana actually has a very strong Southern identity and culture.
It does. And it's funny, though, but if you were to ask any of my relatives in the South, they would say, of course not, that's Midwestern. But I think in terms of Indiana, it does. But the main reason I consider myself a Southerner is that both sides of my family are all from the South. My dad's side from the mountains, Velva Jean's mountains, and my mom's family just outside of Charlotte in a tiny little town. I was born in Charlotte, and we spent every summer and every holiday with my cousins and my grandparents. And then I was raised very Southern. So even though we lived away from the family and the South, I still feel like that's in my bones.
How do you say the mountains down there?
The mountains?
Hmm.
Well, the hills and the hollers and
The Appalachians or the Appalachians?
the Appalachians. I tend to say Appalachians. Although my dad was really from the Smoky Mountains and my mom, Smokies and the Blue Ridge.
Now, you've got some film, television adaptations coming.
Well, Ada Blackjack was optioned by Gene Hackman. And Gene Hackman was actually going to write the screenplay himself with a writing partner he has. He's done some books. But he decided in the end that it was more challenging than he expected to do. So that ended up not happening. Warner Brothers actually optioned the Aquanet Diaries, which was my high school memoir. They optioned that as a television series, which my best high school friend, who's very much a character in the book, Joe Kramer, and they hired us to do the pilot for. And we worked with Charlie Sheen in that one, which was a very interesting experience. But then when Charlie broke ties with Warner Brothers, that kind of fell through.
Oh, the TV series?
That's right.
So it's on hold right now?
It's on hold. That's right.
Oh,
It's Hollywood. It's what happens.
yeah. Well, I hope they revive it. We want to hear more about Big Hair, Big Dreams, small town. With the nostalgia craze for the 50s, 60s right now, I would think it would be very popular. So I hope they.
I would love to see it myself, selfishly.
Do you ever listen to audiobooks?
I do. I love audiobooks, and not just my own.
Do you have time? Where do you do your listening?
In the car. I live in Los Angeles, so I'm always
Oh,
driving.
what kind of things do you like to listen to?
I love just a range of things. I love memoirs and fiction and nonfiction. I mean, really, I read everything and I listen to everything. And it just is a matter of what I'm in the mood for at the time. And sometimes I will read or listen to books simultaneously, sometimes three or four, juggling three or four at a time.
What's the best thing you've heard or read lately?
Tina Fey's Bossy Pants.
Pretty entertaining.
Yes, absolutely. It's refreshing because I've been so entrenched in Hollywood in the 1940s that I'm kind of a method writer, so I like to surround myself by everything of the time, the music and the movies and the reading material, just to stay in the mindset. So I'm finally starting to break away from that since I just handed the book in. So I'm getting to read other things, which is fun.
You narrated your first book, right?
I did, and what a scary experience that was. I mean, it was wonderful, but it was daunting because I have such great respect for the people who do the narration of these books, and I just felt like, me? Really? Okay, well, I will give it my best.
Now, apart from your mother, who were some of your influences, especially when you turned to fiction? Who inspired you or influenced you?
Probably the primary person is Flannery O'Connor, who's my favorite writer next to my mother. I just love her work. And I lived in Georgia for a while just a couple of years ago, and not too terribly far from Milledgeville, which is where her farm was, where she wrote and lived. And it was great to get to go out there and spend some time. I think she's brilliant. And Harper Lee, I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird, I probably read 15 times while I was writing the first novel. And I love, oh gosh, I love the Brontes and Jane Austen and Shirley Jackson, who wrote The House on Haunted Hill and We Have Always Lived in the Castle. She's wonderful as well. And then I learned so much about the writing process from things that Hemingway has said. He had some of the best advice to writers, I think, of anyone. Those are some of the influences.
You've been named a Barnes & Noble Discover Great New Writer. Has that affected you?
It was wonderful. I mean, that was for The Ice Master, and it was so amazing for my first book. To get that honor was just really wonderful. And they were great in the promotion that they did, and I always will have a soft spot for Barnes & Noble because of that.
Right now, the film and TV things are on hold, but have you thought about creating a screenplay, putting it out there? How do you feel about screenwriting?
It's funny that you asked that. Screenwriting as an art form is not my favorite because it feels, for me at least, it feels very confining. I love the freedom of books. You know, the book feels like kind of a wide open landscape to me, and the screenplays and television scripts just feel very, I guess, confining is the best word. That said, I do have a producing partner, and we have just recently, actually, while I was working on this last book, I was working with her on an idea that we had for an original television show. And right now it is being developed with a big time director. So we're hoping that that will
All right.
come through. We can't really talk too much about it, but we've got our fingers crossed.
Well, that's good news.
Yes, exactly.
We'd love to see something of yours on the screen, and it certainly would be a treat to see Velva Jean brought back to life.
And I do get inquiries about Velva Jean frequently, so I'm hoping that that will happen.
I hope so, too. Well, it's been wonderful talking with you today, and we appreciate your time and being with us and telling us all about Velva Jean and some of the new projects coming up.
Truly appreciate it, and it's been wonderful for me as well. So thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Thank you for joining us for this exclusive interview with Jennifer Niven. You can find Becoming Clementine and all of Blackstone Audio's titles at downpour.com.